Good afternoon once again from the World Government Summit in Dubai. Very pleased to welcome Dr. Nasser Saidi. A very big event tonight. Would you please tell us more about?
Well, we just launched the third edition of the Economic Diversification Index. This is a global index that measures how countries have evolved and diversified their economies in terms of their output, how they've diversified their trade, and how they've diversified economic revenue, in other words, sources of revenue. Each three of these aspects is important for overall economic diversification. And of course, economic diversification is part of economic development in general. The importance of this index is that it is a global index with the data available online for researchers, governments, academics, and the media. For a long stretch of time, more than 22 years, 23 years of data, and covering a large number of countries. And this year, the new edition for which we're launching today includes digital trade. So we've introduced digital in terms of trade diversification. And the significant thing, I think, is that the MENA region, compared to the rest of the world, has been progressing fairly rapidly. There are divergences within the MENA region. The GCC countries, I think, are doing extremely well in terms of all the indicators of diversification, increased diversification of trade, government revenue, as well as output. And if you look at the GCC in particular, they now are opening up to the rest of the world. They've taken a number of liberalization measures, which is important for job creation and bringing in the private sector to participate. So you've had a series of reforms post-COVID, which I think are helping the growth of the countries of the region.
What about in terms of implementation? It's all about implementations, and country to country it varies basically. Perhaps the UAE is at a faster pace, unlike others. How can we expedite the process across the region?
If I look across the region, particularly the GCC, I think you've seen progress in Saudi Arabia at a rapid pace. Oman as well. Qatar is catching up. The other countries are catching up. Bahrain had already been diversified. So what you want to look at is the two biggest economies, Saudi Arabia and the UAE, which are rapidly expanding and implementing reforms. I think that the important thing is to continue with the reforms. Continue with opening up to the private sector as much as possible, liberalizing your economy, and of course, opening up trade and services, which we've neglected in the past. So one of the things about this indicator is the increased focus on services and trade and services.
In terms, we've been witnessing a new trend, basically unifying policies across the Middle East, especially in the GCC or the GCC plus two, which is Egypt and Jordan. We have seen the unified visa. We have seen the unified ESG framework between the central banks. We've seen also the green building framework across the GCC. How can we expedite and basically set the unification process in terms of policies, because this would be much faster and much more efficiency?
I think there are two steps. One has to do with greater integration of the GCC countries themselves and moving towards a common market. I think that's an important step. The second one is what I call regionalized globalization. That is, the GCC countries should integrate many of the other countries of the Middle East, including Jordan, Egypt, and others, into their trade, into their global value chains. This will help the development of those countries, but also integrate them. You have to integrate infrastructure across the region, transport, energy, water management, and the like. You need to adapt to climate change, which is happening. So you mentioned ESG. One of the most important things is the challenges we are facing in the region because of climate change. It's no longer minimizing the risk of climate change, it's adapting to climate change. And I think the GCC countries have an important role to play because they have technologies which enable countries to adapt to climate change. And so I think greater integration, greater policy discussions, and integrating those other countries into the GCC is going to be important in the decades to come.
Dr. Nasser, thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you.